All right. I don't want to waste any more time here. We're a couple minutes early, but I want to give a quick intro to Kenny. Um, so let me just scroll down here. So Kenny Sigler is a partner at Sigler Crist Agency, and he's been on both sides of the fundraising table, actually. So he's worked at a nonprofit, and he's also now working as a consultant. So he's done it all. He's got every side covered. And today he runs his own business, helping organizations make sense of everything to do with fundraising and all of the changing ways that it can fluctuate. So I'm excited to hear some of his insights into simplifying marketing and donations together. Welcome, Kenny. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Jenna. It's good to see you and Rob again, and I'm just thrilled to help kick off day two of the summit. It sounds like day one was just a load of information and a lot of excitement, and so I appreciate what you guys are doing just to really help nonprofits get access to the information and the trainings and the education that they need to do their jobs better. So thank you for putting this on, allowing me to kick off day two. And so, yeah, so why don't I go ahead and share my screen real quick. And if you can just make sure that everything's working as it should, then we'll be off and running. All right. All right. So let me give the permissions. Okay, Rob, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see the slides here? All right, good deal. All right, so we're going to go here. Okay, perfect. All right, so we're rocking and rolling now. So I'm gonna do a little bit of an intro here in a few minutes, but I'm really here to talk about something that, speaking of streamlining and scaling and decluttering, which I love. It's reminding me of Marie Kondo when I went through that Netflix phase and watched all that and cleaned out my closet and everything. I can almost think of no better place to start for decluttering and how to streamline than talking about marketing and development. Because a lot of us that work, those of us that work in the nonprofit space, we have this very unique challenge. We have this very unique challenge of how to integrate these two things that are both very similar and very different. And so today, that's what we're going to talk about. Now, here's some of the challenges that I've seen nonprofits and myself, when I was in the field and working for a nonprofit, this is kind of what we struggled with. Number one, the challenge is that we kind of treat marketing and fundraising like it's the same thing, when in reality there are some very key differences between the two. And so, challenge number one is that it's all kind of treated the same way, but there are some very key differences between the two. The second challenge is that oftentimes we have one person within a nonprofit that's expected to do both of the things. We have the same person, and you're expected to be the chief fundraising officer, and you're also expected to be the chief marketing officer. So go ahead and type in the chat, type me if you have to wear both of those hats. I'd love to see that. Type me. I'm gonna yeah. So a lot of people, as I would expect. That's one of the common themes. Rob, you said the thing that you've seen. I mean, that's a thing that we see every day is nonprofit staff having to juggle both of these things at the same time. And one thing that it makes me think of is that it's kind of like the early days of Facebook. Uh, if you're old enough like me to be around whenever Facebook started, you might remember that there was a relationship status. Um, Options that you could choose whenever you started on when you were on Facebook, and you could choose I'm single, I'm in a relationship, I'm married, and then there's this other option called it's complicated. And if you're as old as I am and you were in Facebook, then you remember that it's complicated option. And I feel like that's a good way to describe the relationship between marketing and fundraising for nonprofits. It's complicated, right? And so when we have these two things that are similar but yet very different, and we're trying to treat them the same, and we have the same people, we have one person that's trying to juggle both. It kind of feels like this. This is kind of my visual a lot of nonprofits who you've got the one person, and you might be an executive director, you might be a development director, but you're wearing all the hats. And over time, it's everything. You've got to manage social media, you've got to write the grants, you've got major gifts that you're trying to work on. You're also the media relations person. You're the person that has to go on the news when there's a story about your organization. You feel like a financial advisor at times because you're working with maybe planned giving. And then you're also the head meeting planner. Whenever anything needs to get scheduled, you're the person coordinating everyone's schedule. So this is what it kind of feels like. And it's one of the main reasons that there's so much turnover in the nonprofit space is because we have smaller staffs and we're expecting them to do everything and be the expert in all these fields. And so this is what it can easily feel like at times. All right. So here's a little bit of participation here. I'd love to hear from you. In what ways are marketing and fundraising alike? Because they are not two completely separate worlds. These are not things on opposite ends of the spectrum. There is a relationship between the two, and there are similarities. So I would love to hear from you. What are some ways that you can think of that marketing and fundraising are similar? All right, I'm going to scroll down here. What do we have? So telling the story, yes, that's very good. Both show storytelling or include storytelling activities. They raise mission awareness, very good. Understanding the value proposition, yep. The need for strong networking, very good. They both appeal to people's feelings. I love that, Maria. Yes, yep. Your story to tailor, so it has to be tailored to an audience. They're both needed for successful campaigns. Oh, and Mary says understanding market segmentation, very good. So as we can see in the chat, there are very clear similarities and areas of overlap between fundraising and marketing. It's both promotion of what we do. That's right. So both involve promotion, both involve networking, both involve storytelling. There's a lot of overlap in these two areas. So now let's go to the other side. So in what ways are they different? So we have a lot of ways that these two things are similar. Now, in what ways are they different? I need to bring my chat over here. Okay. So in what ways are they different? We have a lot of answers, a lot of responses to the way that they're similar. Now let's think about how they're different. Um, Marketing. Okay. Let me scroll up. Who is this? Mary Ann. Marketing, awareness, fundraising, money. What I did this session, we normally do this as like a 2-hour working session with an organization to help declutter. And I had someone one time say that, marketing is a lot of this and fundraising is a lot of this. And I love that. It's like marketing is, raising awareness and making more people know about our presence and our existence. And fundraising is a lot of us bringing in dollars. Fundraising to give, marketing gets people engaged to want to give. Oh, that's very good, Victoria. Marketing gets people engaged to want to give. Marketing is information. Fundraising is actively collecting funds. Very good. Fundraising requires a lot more personal follow-up typically. Yeah, Matthew, that's a good point. Whereas marketing might be seen as at scale and it's more awareness and it's more broad. You're speaking to larger audiences. Fundraising has a very, very personalized element to it. Very good. So as we can see, we didn't really have to dive too deep, but what this exercise is designed to show is that there are a lot of similarities in these two areas, and there are also a lot of differences, which goes back to the challenge of if we try to treat both of these things the same, then it's going to get messy, it's going to get cluttered, and you're going to end up like the woman in her office just pulling her hair out, trying to figure out what to do. So what we're saying is that there is a real need within the nonprofit sector to integrate or streamline what they're doing in these two areas. That is very important. And Jenna read my bio. We don't have to go into my whole backstory, but for me, I've been the outsider. I've been the coach helping nonprofits integrate what they're doing to help streamline their marketing and fundraising. I've also been a one-person development and marketing department for a nonprofit. So I've been the person wearing all the hats. And then I also led a team at an academic medical center. And the thing there is I had a marketing department. Now, what I hear a lot of times someone say is, if I only had a marketing department that could do all the marketing so that I could focus on the fundraising, all my problems would be solved. Life would be so much easier. And that makes sense. But the grass is always greener on the other side. And I've had the experience of being both. I had to do everything myself, and that had its challenges, but it also had its benefits. And then when I had to work with the marketing department, there were a lot of good things about that too. But we also really had to work at this integration of marketing and fundraising because they're trained in marketing, wasn't the same training that we had in fundraising. And I remember working on an appeal one time where us in advancement in the development office, we had designed and we had written this appeal to a very specific audience. And it was written in a donor-centered way. And by the time that it went through marketing and everyone else, and they put their polish on it and they put their spin on it and they put their copywriting layer to it, and it came back to us before it went out, it had completely changed. The tone of the letter had changed. The look of the letter had changed. We can't have one word, one sentence paragraphs in a letter. Well, those of us in fundraising know, yes, we can. We wrote it and formatted it very specifically to appeal to our audience. And so we had to do this back and forth of, understanding what the similarities were, what applied to both, but also what made each area very different. So whether you're a one-person shop or whether you have a team, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. No matter what situation you're in, this is a very important topic and for everyone to understand. So these are things that are typically associated with marketing. When we think of marketing, typically I hear that people think of our website. We've got a new brochure to design. We've got signage up at our facilities. We have mass communication. We have video. We have social media. We have to post every day, right? So we're trying to do all these things. These are what typically people put in that marketing item bucket. Now, my favorite is the man the booth, right? How many of us development directors have been also the person that has to go man the booth? Do you have a booth at an upcoming expo or conference and your organization has a table at it? Guess who gets to go man the booth? Development does. Now, there's very few fundraising upside into just standing at a booth at an expo, that may not have any exposure to donors. But we're often the ones that do that. And it could be a good marketing tool, but it may not always be a great fundraising strategy. Been there, done that. And typically, when people think of fundraising, that may not be necessarily included in the fundraising or the marketing bucket. We're thinking about development planning. We're thinking about major gifts, our year-end appeal, our annual event or events, for those of us that have more than one. We're talking about stewardship, how to acquire new donors, plan giving, monthly giving, our donor database. We may have a donor recognition event that we're working on and all these things. So some similarities, but clearly two different buckets. And I want to be clear as we're thinking about streamlining, it might be easy to think that the goal here is to completely combine all of your marketing and your fundraising together into one nice, neat little box. But as we've established, they're very different. The outcomes are different. And the reason why you're doing some of these activities is very different depending on what the outcome is. And so I want to be clear that the goal that you should have whenever you're trying to integrate or streamline your marketing and your fundraising isn't to make them all the same thing. It's not to combine them all into one, bucket or one nice, neat little container. The goal is to clarify the purpose and the outcomes. And we're going to go through how to do that in a very organized way. But I want to be clear that the goal here is not to combine them all. It's to find the relationship because you know what? we have to make this marriage work. That's the way I kind of think about it. It's not trying to blend these two things into one thing. It's about these two things that have to work hand in hand with each other to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. So we're going to cover, I'm keeping it on all the time. So we're going to cover three levels of marketing and development planning. And this is a way that really has always made sense to me in terms of how to organize my efforts in a way that makes sense and in a way that I can follow. And also, finally, in a way that I can share. Because one thing that we in development, we as those of us that work in nonprofits, right? Uh, we also have to understand and take into consideration that we have a board, that we have a committee, maybe multiple committees that we're working with. So it's not only important that we build something that we understand and that we can follow. We also have to think about how we communicate these activities and the reasons for them to our leadership, to our board members, and to our committee members. And so this format, these levels that I'm going to walk you through have really helped me and our clients organize their activities into ways that makes sense. And so these are the three levels that we're going to talk about. Level one, strategic planning and vision. Level two is the overall campaign strategy. And then level three will be the specific campaign tactics that are happening within those. So let's start with level one, strategic planning and vision. Now, this is not a strategic planning session, and I'm not going to turn it into a strategic planning session, I promise you. But this is where we have to start. We've worked with so many organizations that were really trying to streamline their fundraising and their marketing, and they're trying to do more. And then once we start digging deeper, what we might find is that the board does not really have a clear understanding of what the organization's mission is, and they're not quite sure where they're going or what they want to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. And it is really hard to raise money and to increase awareness and inspire people to get engaged in one way or another if you don't have that clarity of what your vision is, what your mission is, and what your strategic plan is. So that is where we have to start. Now, can you do some things in marketing and fundraising, and can you have some success there? Absolutely. You can do some good things there. But if you really want to take it to the next level, we have to know that the organization has a clear mission, a clear vision, and some sort of a strategic plan in place. Always remember that donors give because of what you're going to do, not because of what you have already done. And so that has always been kind of forefront in my mind of, when we're trying to market and we're trying to fundraise for our nonprofit, we have to know where we're going because that is what is going to motivate donors to give. And that's the purpose of strategic planning and having a clear vision is so that your board and you can be unified in direction and that you can use that to inspire people to come alongside that journey with you. Without that, we do tend to lean on what we've done in the past. And if you're an organization that has a long history, if you've been around for 50 years, then kind of the default is to talk about how long you've been around and where your beginnings were. And as fun as that might be, and that might be that applies to a certain audience, for most people, they're going to be inspired by what you're going to do. And it's our job to help share that vision and motivate people to get engaged. We also get asked, well, what's the ideal method? And the reason why people don't like to talk about strategic planning or visioning is because we've had bad experiences. I've had bad experiences with strategic planning where we come up with, all these core values. We have 5 core values, and it took us 6 months to come up with these core values that sound like everybody else's core values: integrity, responsibility, and accountability. It's all these things. We could have done that. So there's been this backlash to strategic planning that I've seen basically because of bad experiences. And so the method of going through the strategic planning doesn't have to be too complicated. It's all about trying to answer those questions of what is our mission? Is it relevant? What is the vision for our organization moving forward? What do we want to look like in 3 to 5 years? And then finally, how are we going to get there? What are some concrete steps that we need to take to get from where we are today to where we want to be in a number of years? It really is that simple. And those are the outcomes that you want to have in your first level of strategic planning. So again, I told you I'm not going to make this a strategic planning session, but I cannot emphasize enough how important that is in marketing and fundraising. When it's not clear where the organization's going, there's just so much that you can do, and it's a great way to get your board involved. Because how many of us have had board members that are just telling us what to do, and if we only do this, then we can raise more money, and they get focused on what we're doing and they lose sight of their job as a board to really focus on the bigger picture and cast that vision for those of us on staff and for our donors to get excited about. All right, so now that's level one. That's where we have to start. That is essential. It's very important. Now let's talk about level two. This is the campaign strategy. And what I want you to do right now, so I want you to type me if you've ever heard of the term annual fund campaign. How many of you have heard the term annual fund campaign? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Is this a new term? No, of course not. Right, we've all heard this term. Look how many of us here have heard this term annual fund campaign. Now, so we've heard of it. We kind of know what it is. But when I do this session in person and I kind of ask people, I'm like, well, can someone help me define what an annual fund campaign is? Most of the time, I don't get a lot of answers. Like, what is it? Give me a clear definition of what an annual fund campaign is. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. It's kind of hard to explain in a succinct way. David says, "No, ask for money all the time." that's right, David. Yeah. Is there ever a time that we're not asking for money? No, it just keeps rolling over. It's this constant job that we have. We're trying to increase engagement and raise money. Things that you do every year to raise funds. Yeah, Barbara, you're right. These are the things that we do every year to raise money. Now, here's the thing that I want to change about maybe the way that you think about an annual fund campaign. Now, okay, so Rosa says a big effort for dollars, for money. That's right. So when you think about an annual fund campaign, what that kind of seems to imply is that there is one campaign that's happening throughout the entire year. Our annual fund campaign is to raise $1 million, right? So you kind of think of, okay, this is our overall campaign for a 12-month cycle, depending on maybe probably what your fiscal year is. But these are the things that we're going to do all year to raise the money. Well, in reality, we really don't have one campaign that's happening all year long. When I think of nonprofits that we work with, they have a lot of things that happen all year long. So let me just help you think about this. If you were to think about a timeline, so if you were to look at your calendar, do you do the same things from January all through December? Or do you do specific targeted things during the year? For example, you have an event. So your event has its own message. It has its own target audience. It has a goal. Like there are all these things that happen within that event. You're doing probably elements of that event throughout the course of the year, but there's a time of the year that you're really honed in and focused on your event. And guess what's coming up here pretty soon? Your year-end campaign. We should already be thinking and planning and building our year-end campaigns. That is a big push at a specific part of the year that's specifically designed to appeal to donors in that window. And so Barbara says the annual campaign includes every activity that you do each year. Okay, so let's think on this. So direct marketing, events, corporate foundations, these activities all have different targets, framing, and messaging. Barbara, you're exactly right. So here's the way that I've always thought about annual campaigns that makes the most sense to me. We do need to have a goal. So we do need to know how much our organization needs to raise every year. We all agree with that. But the way that we go about raising that, as Barbara says, is in different campaigns. And so rather than thinking about how we're going to raise it all year long and think about all the, things that might be happening all year, we break that up into specific campaigns. And so let me show you what that might look like. And I'm going to warn you, this might seem a little overwhelming, but this is the reality of what we do. It's identifying key targeted campaigns that you are running throughout the year. Here we think about them in terms of boulders and pebbles. How many of you feel like that you're constantly working on small tasks, right? So type me if you feel like that every day throughout the week you're just working on a bunch of tasks, task. Like that to-do list is never ending, right? Yeah, same here. And when I was a one-person shop, same here. Like that to-do list, and you get caught up and you're just bouncing back and forth between, right? Madeline, I need I need some commas in there because that's a really big number. So I don't know if that's 100 million, 10 million, what, but that's a lot of zeros. So, but Madeline's right. It is a bunch of small tasks. And I think of those as pebbles. Like those are like pebbles. We're constantly juggling all these pebbles all day long, and we're juggling, but there's no way to bring them all together. And that's where an annual campaign that just kind of blanket sits over everything we're doing all year long doesn't always help to combine all those little pebbles into organized containers or campaigns. So this is the thing that I was saying might be a little uh, uh, jarring at first, but this is the way that we really think about annual campaigns. Is that the reality is, like Barbara said earlier, we actually do a number of things throughout the year that have a specific message, that has a specific audience, that has a specific goal. And instead of treating it like one big long annual fund campaign, we've always found it more effective to break it up into smaller targeted campaigns. Now, you need to have your overall fundraising goal. So let's say that your annual fund goal is $1 million. The question is, how are we going to get to that $1 million? And the answer to that question is we have to do a variety of things to get to that point. And we really need different audiences to help us get there. Now, so that's from the fundraising side. So we need to have our event, we need to have a giving day that we participate in, we need to have a year-end campaign, we need to have a monthly giving campaign. All these things have target audiences, specific goals, and specific tools that you need in order to accomplish this. And so that's why I love what causevox is doing here and talking about tools and systems and streamline, because whenever you're working on these different campaigns, you need different tools, softwares, and systems in order to make this happen. And when we treat it all like one big annual fund campaign, it doesn't give us the specific information that we need. So let me give you an example. When we run a giving day campaign for an organization, there are certain tools that we need to have in place in order to make that effective. We need to have the audience clarified. We need to be able to segment our audience effectively. We need to have the right message on why that they should pre-give to the giving day or give on the day of. And then we also need to have stewardship specifically tailored to donors who gave on giving day. And the more personalized that we can make that communication and that follow-up, then the better experience our donors will have. That requires a whole level, its own systems and processes to make that happen. Now, if you're going to launch a monthly giving campaign, that requires its another systems and set of processes. You have to identify who your target audiences are, who that is, and how they're going to give. And now we're talking about your website. We're talking about your CRM. We're talking about your ability to steward those donors on a regular basis and connect them to your monthly giving program and the impact that they're making. And so that looks and feels in some ways similar to Giving Day, but also very different in those ingredients. And so the change in the mind shift that works the best for me is to start putting these key campaigns in place on a timeline so that I can see where my focus is at different parts of the year. And it doesn't mean that I have to focus on one thing at a time. You'll see that a number of things are overlapping. And that's because we can't just do one thing at a time. We can't be so tunnel vision that we're only focused on our event and we don't do anything else. But what it does do is that it helps us see where we have the most activity and then where we may have some room to work on some other things. So I mentioned earlier that this is a great tool for board members. And that's because if we developed a system like this and we have all of our campaigns on this timeline, so let's say our very opinionated board member who always loves sharing their next fundraising idea says, you know, Kenny, I feel like that this is the year to have our fall chili cook-off. This is it. It's going to raise us a lot of money, and this is the time. Well, I'm going to look at my fall and say, yeah, you know what we already have planned and what we're working on for the fall? We've got a donor luncheon, we have our year-end campaign, we have our volunteer initiative that we're launching, and we also have Giving Tuesday that we're preparing for. There's all these campaigns that we have lined up and we're prepared for in the fall. Adding one more campaign on top of that is going to be a heavy lift. And this is an easy way for board members to visualize all the activities that are happening that they may not know unless you presented it in this way. You can even add some specific dates on here because you may be making an announcement. If you're working on your newsletter, if your event, you can also add specific dates on here just to clarify those milestones that are happening throughout the year. So again, very organized way that you can present this and help organize your thoughts and your plans for the year. Is a great way to communicate with volunteers, with board members. Now, there's one more thing that I want to mention here before we move into level 3, and that is we also treat internal work as its own campaign, because what always gets kicked down the road, put on the back burner, whatever analogy you want to use, it's always the internal stuff. And that's why I love, what causevox is doing, and Rob said this well in the opening. A lot of these internal things never seem to happen, and it's because we always prioritize our marketing and our fundraising ahead of our internal pieces. And so what we do in this style is that we also treat those things like its own campaign. So for one group, I'm trying to think of what it was called. It was a foundation building campaign. We said, all right, for the next 2 months, we're going to launch the foundation building campaign. And in this campaign, we had a list of things that the organization had always wanted to do, but had never made time for. So we treated it like a campaign. The foundation building campaign was going to research donor management software options because they didn't have one. It was going to make some key integrations onto their existing website. It was going to clean up their list, and it was going to secure more email addresses. All these things that we were doing was packaged into a campaign. So instead of all of these internal steps and systems that needed and policies, we also wrote and drafted and approved key policies within that foundation building campaign. So instead of those things taking all year long or even more than a year to work on, just when we have time, we concentrated it into a campaign so that we knocked out some of the key internal elements within a 2-month window, so that we were able to run faster the rest of the year because we had taken care of it. So that's a very key point. Sometimes it's really great to treat these internal components as their own campaign. And I found that whenever you give something a name and you give it a campaign, then it kind of becomes a real thing. So you may want to think, and we don't have time for this, but you may want to think about some of the things that you're already doing that you can start to capture as or package as a campaign. The final thing, level 3, campaign planning. Now, the realization is we can talk about strategic planning, and we can talk about building this really pretty timeline, and we can organize all of our campaigns and say, this is when I'm going to work on the event, and this is when we're going to launch the year-end campaign. This is when we're going to launch our stewardship campaign. But the reality is that we actually have to turn those campaigns into action, right? So there's one more level that we have to go into, and that is the actual planning of each campaign. Now, before we go into level 3, excuse me, I feel like that I should go back to level 2 and say, we're here to talk about the integration of marketing and fundraising. And you can see in these timelines, this is where you can have both of your fundraising and marketing campaigns. Because you may have that drive to increase your volunteer base. You may have a goal to increase overall awareness for the organization, and those are things that may not fit in that fundraising bucket. But how many times do those things just keep getting said over and over and over again, but nothing ever happens? Nothing ever, you don't do anything. Or this might even be worse. You do one or two things, but then you move on to something else. And just doing one or two things doesn't really move the needle that much. And so what this is designed to do is to help plug in your fundraising campaigns, and then also take your marketing, take those goals that you've been talking about for a long time, increase awareness, increase your volunteer base, and actually plug those in to this timeline so that you can see how your fundraising and your marketing campaigns are both working together. So when I was at the nonprofit that I worked for, and I was the one man development department, I had to organize all of my development efforts to make sure that I was strategic in how I was going to raise the money. And at the same time, we had the need to find more students for our programs. And we had to figure out, well, where are our students and what do they respond to? And how do we communicate to them? Is it print? Is it digital? Is it social media? Do they listen to the radio? Is it radio advertising? Is it stream? Like all these things that we had to think about that weren't necessarily development focused, but they were a marketing campaign that we needed to build in order to attract more students to our organization. And we had to figure out when we were going to do that so that it didn't interfere with too much of our fundraising efforts. We had to be strategic in how we planned those out. So this isn't just designed to be a fundraising strategy. This is designed to visualize both your fundraising and your marketing campaigns for your nonprofit. So level 3, campaign planning. So in my experience, there are 5 things that every campaign has to have. And these are the 5 things. And we have a planning worksheet. Anyway, these are the 5 things that every campaign should include. Number 1, a time frame. It seems very elementary, it seems very obvious, but how many times do we start a project, but we don't have a clear start date, and we definitely don't have a clear end date in mind? And that's one of the reasons why things keep dragging on and on and on way longer than they ever should, is because we don't establish a clear time frame. So every campaign that you have should have a very clear start and end date. And if you're thinking about your event, or let's say your year-end campaign, it doesn't have to end on December 31st. And so I always add at least a week after our campaign to allow for things like donor stewardship. So campaign timelines don't always have to end at a specific date that correlates with your event. It can also have a little bit of breathing room so that you build in that time for stewardship. It has to have clear outcomes. Remember what we said at the beginning, where one of the complications between marketing and fundraising and the differences is that there are clear outcomes that we're striving for. If this is a fundraising campaign, we need to have exactly what the outcomes we're looking for are. We're trying to raise money. We are trying to raise a certain amount of money. We are trying to get 15 new donors through this campaign. And if that is clear, then the tactics will become clear. If it's a marketing campaign, like the one that I mentioned earlier, we're trying to increase our student base by 10% over the next 5 to 6 months. You know, that is a very clear outcome. And one of the biggest missteps that nonprofits make, and like, if you don't take anything away from the session, here it is. One of the biggest mistakes that nonprofits make is that they try to build a fundraising campaign and apply marketing tactics, or the other way around. They're trying to build a marketing campaign, but they're trying to apply fundraising tactics. And a lot of that happens because there was no clarity on what the outcomes are for the campaign. So we need to know what the time frame is for the campaign. We need to have clear outcomes. We need to know who the audience is. You guys said that one of the similarities between the two is that we have target audiences, but the difference is who those audiences are is different. My target audience for reaching out to students is a lot different than my target audience for a major gift campaign. Those are way different audiences. So if I know the outcome, I know who my target audience should be. And I also need to know what my budget is. This is, those of us in nonprofits, we're not always the best at looking at budgets. We don't like to talk about budgets. We shouldn't have to spend any money. But guess what? It costs money to raise money, and it costs money to increase awareness. So when you're thinking about your campaign, ask the hard question. How much money do we have to spend on this campaign? And if you're working on an internal campaign, you may not have to spend anything in order to make those things happen. But ask the question, and from the beginning, define what the budget is for every campaign that you're doing. And finally, key tactics. This is where you have to identify what are the 3 or 4 most important activities that we need to do in order to achieve the outcome. Because you can do a million things, but in my experience, when a successful campaign happens, it isn't because we did a million things really well. It was because we focused on a few things and we did them exceptionally well. And that is what determined the success of the campaign. And so once you have the time frame, outcomes, audience, the budget, then the key tactics is, what do we need to do really well in order to make this happen? What are the priorities? So we have a campaign checklist, a spreadsheet that has those 5 things in a neat order. And so I'm happy to share that either through the follow-up of the webinar or email me. And I'd be more than happy to share the campaign checklist with you. It's always a good exercise to go through when we're thinking this out and we're having to write down our ideas and we're working with our other staff members or our committee members to go through this. An easy, simple way to put those ideas down. So real quick, moving through some quick tips. Don't move too fast. There's a lot of pressure today to move really fast and to just go, go, go and do. But really, the most effective nonprofits are the ones that take the time to think strategically and spend the time to organize their efforts in order to then do better work. So try your best to resist that urge to just move fast. Moving quickly is not always the best solution. And so make boulders, build those campaigns. A lot of what you're doing, you're already doing. Just group it into campaigns to make it clear throughout the year. And then you're always going to have evergreen activities. Stewardship is not something that you only do in a confined space. That's something that happens all year long. But again, with the right systems and the right planning and the right policies and procedures that you can build within a campaign, it'll help make those activities a lot more efficient and over the entire year. So I'm trying to keep an eye on the time, and so I think we have a few minutes for questions. And so everyone, just this is a lot of activity. So we normally do this in like 2 hours. Trying to do this in a short period of time. So Marianne asks, what's an evergreen activity? I'd say something like stewardship. you're never not stewarding your donors. And so stewardship isn't something that just happens in a confined period of time. You want to steward your donors all year long. And so that is an evergreen activity. You're never not taking good care of your donors. But the way that you take care of those donors is going to depend based on where they are in their donor cycle and what their giving preferences are. And so, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a giving day, the stewardship for that giving day might look a lot different than stewardship for a major donor. And so evergreen activity would be something like stewardship. It's happening all year long. It just needs to look different at different parts of the year. All right. And Karen asks, can I put the worksheet in the chat? I cannot do that right now. I'm not equipped to do that at the moment, but I know my friends at causevox can help share that following the webinar. So I think we are 1 minute left. I don't know that that's enough time for a question. So I just want to end it by saying thank you so much to all of my hardworking nonprofit friends out there. This has been so great to be a part of, and I just love the time that everyone is taking to participate in the summit, to learn our craft of fundraising and marketing. This, I can't tell you how happy I am to be a part of this. So thank you so much. And Jenna, if you have anything else on the back end, any questions or anything, I'm happy to stay on.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic. Kenny, I love Corinna's comment. I felt like you have spent a day or two or a week in my office. So it sounds like you hit home for some of these, our fundraiser friends here. So thank you so much for your time. Yeah, Kenny, if you want to send me that worksheet that you referenced and you send it as like a link to me, I can include it in the follow-up. And then for everyone here, I just added Kenny's website and LinkedIn in case you want to connect with him. Make sure to reach out, answer any, I'm sure hopefully Kenny, you'll be open to answering questions that way too. So
Anytime.
thank you so much. Really appreciated your time here with us today. Couldn't do without
All
you.
right.
Have
Thanks,
a
Jenna.
good
Thanks
rest
for
of your
having
day.
me.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.